The first time I realized something was wrong, it was just after sunrise. When the light was still soft and the air smelled like dew and hay, I drove my old pickup down the familiar gravel road toward my ranch gate, coffee in hand. Already thinking about the fence line I planned to check that morning. That gate had been there longer than I had owned the place, longer than most of the neighbors had lived out here. It was plain, sturdy, and unlocked during the day, just like it always had been. But that morning, I slowed to a stop and stared, certain my eyes were playing tricks on me. Someone had stacked concrete blocks, orange cones, and a heavy chain right across the entrance, like they were trying to barricade a city street instead of a country ranch road. At first, I laughed under my breath. I thought maybe the road department was doing work and forgot to leave a notice. Then I noticed the laminated sign zip-tied to one of the cones. It said private access closed by HOA authority in bold black letters. That's when my stomach tightened. We don't have an HOA on my ranch. My land sits just beyond a newer subdivision. One of those developments with matching mailboxes and neatly trimmed lawns. I had heard grumbling from some of those folks about dust from the road and cows near the fence line, but nothing like this. I parked, got out, and walked up to the barricade. The chain wasn't just symbolic, it was padlocked. I stood there listening to the wind move through the grass, feeling that familiar mix of anger and disbelief that comes when someone crosses a line you never thought they'd dare cross. This road wasn't some shared driveway. It was a county-maintained road that led directly to my ranch, and I had a recorded easement older than most of the houses down the way. Later that morning, while I was still trying to figure out my next move, a woman marched down the road toward me. She had a clipboard tucked under her arm and that tight, satisfied smile I've come to recognize over the years. She introduced herself as the HOA president from the subdivision. Without missing a beat, she told me the homeowners had voted to close the road because it was unsightly and unsafe, and that ranch traffic didn't fit the character of their community. She spoke slowly, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. I told her calmly that the road was public and that she had no authority to block my gate. She waved her hand and said they had already handled it and that if I had a problem, I could take it up with their attorney. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a power play. Over the next few days, things escalated. I had to park down the road and walk in just to check on my animals. Deliveries were delayed. A neighbor who had been using that road for decades stopped by to tell me he'd been threatened with a fine if he drove through again. Word spread fast, and the story took on a life of its own. Some folks from the subdivision avoided eye contact. Others watched from behind curtains. The HOA president seemed to enjoy every minute of it, posting notices and taking photos like she was documenting a great victory. I dug out my old paperwork, yellowed and curled at the edges. Deeds, maps, easement records, all neatly filed away. I made a few phone calls, starting with the county clerk and then the road department. At first, it was slow. Voicemails, transfers, and the usual, "we'll look into it." Meanwhile, the barricade stayed, like a challenge sitting right there at the end of my road. One afternoon, a county road supervisor finally came out to take a look. He stood there with his hands on his hips, staring at the cones and blocks. I showed him the documents. He nodded, flipped through them, and shook his head. He told me, very plainly, that the road was county property and that no HOA had any right to block it. He said he'd take care of it. The HOA president didn't take that news well. She showed up while we were talking, red-faced and loud, insisting the county had no say because the subdivision paid taxes. The supervisor didn't raise his voice. He just told her she was interfering with public access and that if the barricade was removed, the county would remove it themselves. She stormed off, phone already pressed to her ear. The next morning, I heard the low rumble of heavy equipment before I even reached the gate. 2 county trucks were parked on the side of the road, lights flashing. Workers were loading the concrete blocks onto a flatbed. The cones were tossed aside, the chain cut clean through with bolt cutters. In less than 15 minutes, the road was clear, just like it had always been. One of the workers grinned at me and said, "Happens more than you'd think." By the afternoon, a formal notice was posted at the subdivision entrance, stating that the road was public and that any further obstruction would result in fines. The HOA president never came back to argue. In fact, I didn't see her for weeks. When I finally did, she looked straight ahead and walked a little faster. Life settled back into its normal rhythm. Trucks came and went. Dust rose and fell with the breeze. The cows didn't care one bit about the drama humans stirred up over a stretch of gravel. But the experience stuck with me. It was a reminder that sometimes, people mistake confidence for authority and forget that rules apply to everyone. If this story struck a chord with you, take a second to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and makes sure you don't miss future stories like this. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments and say hello.